Hello,
Thank
Dmitry.
you.
I thought which t-shirt will be better today, so I decided to take
No. Take it off. We're not actually advertising for Ethereum.
Why not? Like product
Because
placement.
you don't need advertisement. That's the point. The
Yeah.
product is really great that you don't really need
So
an
he's wearing
advertisement.
it out of joy.
Are you joyful at 1 a.m.? Is it 1 a.m. in
yeah,
Australia?
it's okay. It's unusual time. Yeah,
Okay,
So you're in
perfect.
Australia, Anton?
yeah, in Australia,
Oh,
Australia
wow.
here.
Uh-huh.
I think maybe Canada a bit better place, maybe more space. I don't know. Australia too far from everything. At least for
Mhm.
you, it's more easy to go to US, to go to theater, and come back to your like forest
Y-
places.
You know that expression. I mean, it's a very important thing to realize that at any moment, the only thing that stands between us and being happy, perfectly happy, is just our thought that this should be different, you know? So, yeah,
True.
Australia, Canada, many places. Like Navalny is in prison, and, you know, you read his writings and he feels happy, right? And it's crazy, but life is interesting.
In
And
case
also
you,
the only thing that take us to war is that difference of the opinions.
Yeah.
That's
in
also
case in case humanity will feel themselves happy, it will not be any progress. People should feel struggling and
No,
be
that's
creative.
exactly how internal unhappiness sells it to ourselves. No, I cannot feel happy. I have to something, you know, like, and that's bullshit because it's actually like if you look at even at Vitalik, right? He has not created Ethereum out of like, oh, something is wrong, let's fix it. He created it more out of like, oh, wow, that's a cool thing. Let's create it. It probably will be good, you know, it out of the sense of freedom. And if you look at the Ethereum community, there are lots of people there, right, who joined because they can sense that, you know, internal freedom, and then more people join it because people kind of attracted to that.
yeah, that's
Okay,
true.
yeah. Nice opinion. Okay, think about it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about you. Usually, I think when people are interviewing you, they're always asking about Vitalik, but not about you. Tell us who you are, what do you do, and yeah, and then perhaps we can get into other questions.
Sure, but who am I? A human being that's always changing, that has many infinite sides to a human being, just like any other human being. And I do things that bring me joy. And life brings all kinds of things to me: business things, relationship things, kids things, you know, philosophy things, and music. There are so many things. So obviously, you know, I'm giving you a very generic answer, but it's like if you want me to drill down into something more specific, yeah, let me know what would you like me to focus on.
I mean, sure. Like, give us a little bit of background about your career. I know that now you're more into self mastery, meditation, learning, obviously, like self improvements and so forth. But
No,
how did you?
I'm
No,
not.
no, you're not.
I've been on in self improvement for many years, and I'm
Well,
so
we are
happy
all.
that
Yeah, we
that
are all.
kind of,
Obviously, it's
yeah.
it's not a destination; it's a journey for sure. But
Yeah, but what I mean is that it's how to put this: self improvement is a wonderful, amazing stage of life, but only until kind of you finally get to see perfection of life as it is. And it's surprisingly, Anton, it doesn't mean that then you stop like, oh, I don't want to do anything. It's perfect. I'm perfect. It's actually now you doing the same thing that you're doing, but you're doing it with much more passion and energy because you're not doing them because like this is bad in me, this is bad in the universe, it has to be fixed. But you're doing them like, okay, you know what? Like I feel like doing this, you know, so let's do this. Let's have fun, right? And there's much more energy and that power of creation, fun, love, joy, silliness than an energy of resisting, like, this is wrong, let me fix that. And, and those fuckers, they really fucked it up. Let me, really punish and fuck those fuckers. Like, that's a painful energy that creates more pain.
Yes, being perfectionist is great, but being perfect, I think there's a problem because you can never be perfect. There's as if like you cannot be happy. There might be another moment that you could be happier than you are right now. So there's
Well, that's a great point. And the thing is, like, people confuse pleasure with happiness, right?
Mhm.
So happiness is not about like, oh, I'm feeling so much pleasure and joy right now. Happiness is really about being at peace with like things that come and go. And the thing is, like, when you get enough life experience and observation and reflection, you kind of see, oh yeah, things are always coming and going. Here's sadness, here's joy, here's fear, here's excitement, and you cannot hold on to them. You cannot, like, and the human mind will try that. Human mind will like try to figure out what is the reason I'm feeling this right now. How do I fix this? How do I fix this? But it's always falling behind because, like, you're already feeling right now at this moment what are you feeling, and your attempts are always like, oh, how do I fix it in the future? But kind of the thoughts kind of take you away from what is now, and they, like, it's always in the future, like, oh, in the future I'll find some kind of happiness and peace and contentment, and that it's never found. Like, you only think, oh, I found it, and now we can grasp into this, but it will again fly away like a butterfly, right? So happiness is really in that realization and seeing that, yeah, this is what life is. Life is constantly flowing, changing stuff. Look at my background. That's one simple metaphor for things that are always changing and flowing.
Mhm. Can we say happiness is a state of mind, pleasure or satisfaction is when you satisfy a need? You can always be happy regardless of any situation. Can we say that?
Well, I would say that happiness is something much deeper than the state of mind, because it kind of assumes that there's you that has a mind and that mind can be happy or unhappy. Happiness is what is deeper, what's beyond that state of mind, because the mind can be in a happy state, in a sad state, and an angry state,
Mhm.
and so many different states. But yeah, like, true happiness is actually something that's beyond all of that. And I know that it does make much sense unless you really spend a lot of time on this. But yeah, things kind of don't have to make sense. And that's such a relief, because like all of my life, I kind of been living with my mind, and how do I find the truth, the answers, and um, knowing stuff, and yeah, the answer cannot be found there.
No, but tell us, how did you start your journey towards all these approaches? What made you at some point, because we always have a trigger point, what triggered you?
Well, if we've been honest, you take any particular event, and that event has infinite number of inputs into this, right? Like, why is this human being in this way? It's like on Twitter, sometimes people tell me, oh, Dmitry, you must be so proud of Vitalik, such good parenting. Wow. Well, okay. So Vitalik is the way he is because of 1 trillion different things, his genes, which came to him through me and his mom, the parenting of me and his mom, and many other people who are involved in his parenting, the school, the environment, living in Canada, the food he ate, what was happening around the world, things like that, right? The books he read, like, if you start looking to this, then you can. So humans always try to find this, oh, okay, so it is this way because of this reason. And then, like, okay, now that I know the reason, I can read this book, I can follow this practice, I can do this, and then I will finally be happy. And they might find some, joy and some other cool stuff through that, but eventually it will be lost, and that cycle of seeking will continue. So yeah, like, so if you say when my journey started, like, again, I was born, and I had my genes, I had my upbringing, I had my environment growing up in the Soviet Union, was in a specific geographical area and reading tons of books and things. And then from that, my journey unfolded into many different things, from lots of learning and, being smart and computer science and running businesses and doing different things and meditating and so many other things.
Yes, I totally understand. But like, obviously, everybody's journey is different. But were you asking questions, and what kind of questions were you asking? Obviously, being born in Soviet Union, the political environment, the social environment, the economic environment. I mean, all these are triggers. But at some point, what were you like? Because obviously you were aware, and we all have consciousness, right?
Do we?
We all do have that, but are we aware, and are we conscious? And I think that's kind of like an individual level. But when did
what does it mean for you to be conscious?
Who I am, what state of mind I'm actually operating at, and am I grateful for what I have? And
and when you're not grateful for what you have, do you blame yourself? Like, what happens when you realize, oh, you know what, I'm in a shitty state of mind, I'm feeling totally ungrateful and pissed off, like, then what?
Then I reset. And then I become
and
grateful.
if you fail to reset,
I will try again, because that's the only I know that you can. Because if you don't recognize how grateful you are, you cannot actually move forward. And I actually have learned that through a lot of lessons and trainings. And I think that state of mind is really important. It could be kind of like a prison for you. But and I think that's the consciousness. That's when you recognize, like, you have to recognize that, yes, that was failure for me, but that failure was a lesson. I accept that. I recognize, I'm grateful for that lesson. I want to try more. I want to do it again. I want to redo it. But how was it for you?
How was what for me?
How was it for you that you realized that you were different, obviously, and you became conscious and you became aware that, like, the state of mind is important, meditation is important, and maybe obviously bringing up in that environment, the Soviet Union environment, was a kind of like wasn't a weakness point for you, but you took it for mostly as a kind of like a power point to empower yourself and do more, which we usually do that. I mean, the minds that are different, for sure. I mean, because
I love your story about me. I love it. It's awesome.
because I mean, I'm originally from Iran. So I totally understand the environment.
I grew up in Chechnya, not that far from Iran.
It's like, exactly, it's the same kind of thing. And people think that it's imprivileged to be born in those areas because of the circumstances, the political environment, the economic environment, but they don't understand that these environments make you different. But then that mindset, which is not going to limit your brain, but it's going to empower you, because you can, like, literally take that as an advantage, not as a disadvantage, which I have actually always learned to do that. Like, born as a woman in a kind of like a Middle East, it was always, people could become a victim of it, but I don't believe in victim, kind of like, genre or saga. So I have always found a way to empower it and empower myself. So I'm looking for that kind of like point in your life when you realize this is power. This is not impossible for you, but it is possible. And then you moved out, and then you came to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about this is that it is a very common journey for a human being to kind of start out in this victim model of the world, if you will. And then the next, I mean, some people are lucky enough that their environment and their setup is supports them moving into a different way of thinking about the world when they're feeling I'm their achiever, I'm empowered and whatnot. And that's not the last phase of their kind of, if you will, of the human mind thinking about the world. The way I think about this is like human being is an entity that creates models of everything around them, and it's basically creating models, and then it's constantly comparing. Okay, is this model inside of me matching what is being perceived out there, and should the model be improved, and so on. And one of their things that we model is a model of ourselves, right? A model of like, what is this human being? Because this is the number one object that we see, that our sense organs perceive most of the time, right? And this particular human being. So then we build a model of this, right? And for some time, this model can become like a prison. It's like, oh, I'm shy, I'm this, I'm weak, I'm this and that, right? But then we can also, as we keep observing, then we accumulate more information. It's like, oh, okay, in this situation, this human being behaved in this way, and the other situation behaved in that way. And then you build a bigger, more nuanced model of yourself. Then you also notice how your emotional state affects your perception of yourself and the world, because, sometimes we're angry and we can no longer feel the love for another human being, and we like everything or we're depressed and things feel dark and hopeless and whatnot, right? And then we remember there are other states that we've noticed in this human being when things just felt so full of love and joy and so on, and we keep observing that, right? And eventually we develop better and better model. We realize, no, yeah, okay, this human being is deeply affected by so many things happening. It's like what food has been consumed, what's the weather today, what were the facial expressions of people around us, what kind of music is playing, and the other birds. Are we seeing trees, or do we see empty concrete or whatever, stuff like that, right? And we can notice like how the human being reacts differently and gets into different states. And the thing is, like, those different states, they also, when we within a particular state, for most human beings, it's like it's hard to see other sides for ourselves. When we're in this state, we're like, yeah, this is how it is, and this is how it always will be, and we can no longer connect with different emotion. If we're depressed, then like, yeah, it's hopeless, there is no joy. But again, if we keep observing that and reflecting that, eventually we see, oh yeah, it's like it's constantly changing, right? And eventually that model of a human being, the boundaries of that, because again, like most of the time we live with this illusion that here's me, here's the world, and it's me against the world, right? Again, like from first in the victim position, then in like I'm the doer and achiever position. But again, like if you go further and further, and you see, yeah, okay, you know what? It's actually a constant flow and interaction between the human being, between other aspects of this, and the more you keep observing that, the more you see that, like, okay, the boundaries that my model has created for this, they're actually imaginary. It's like when I'm seeing this is me and this is this person, the boundary is really just in my mind. It's an abstract notion. And actually, just yesterday I was reading this article, this piece of research, which was very interesting, that some neuroscience research that indicated that, and I will grossly oversimplify a very complex article, but it was basically saying that when two people interact closely, it's been observed that the connections between neurons in their brain kind of develop, and it makes more sense than to model them as a system versus like separate entities, if you will. And that's really the case. So I guess the science is just kind of starting to approach those kind of frontiers But that's for me is a better model of reality, is seeing the interconnectedness of everything in the universe, human beings and animals. Yeah, Anton.
I have a question. So I guess so it's in continue to your topic. Experiment about two slits, right? I guess
About what?
Two slits experiment.
Yes.
When what is a light? Like light is a particles or light is a wave? And,
Yes.
when you put when you put the guy who like watching the experiment.
Yeah. Quantum physics, quantum mechanics.
Yeah, quantum physics. Yeah. So what do you think? Are we in some kind of simulation? Because our brains, it's neural networks, and so you and me feel like quite advanced programs, and our world, same as the blockchain, built from the layers. So we don't know what is a base layer. We can guess it's maybe a string theory, and then on top of this we have atoms. We have we have cells. In cells we have DNA, and so on. And eventually we have our brains, which on more high level. And now we are thinking, and we understand. I'm thinking. I'm exist. So what do you think? Are we in
well, first of all, the things that you mentioned, cells, brains, and all of that stuff. Don't forget that they are all models. It's not like the universe has cells. It's like our minds have decided to just, call those kind of entities. We've decided, okay, we will have a boundary about these objects and we'll call them cells. And this is fine. It's a great model. But again, this is just for our convenience, right? And the whole problem was like, asking whether a light is a particle or a wave, again, it's a question of a model because, do we have a model like, do we use a model for the light like it's a wave or is it particle? Well, light is something else. And that's kind of, it really messing up with our human desire to come up with one simple, understandable model. Well, and light can be modeled by either one of those models depending on the context, right? Like, for example, people used to think that the earth is flat, right? And you can say, well, it's incorrect, earth is round. Well, it's not round either, right? It's like, it's a very complex shape, but the model of the earth being flat was good enough for what people needed back then, given other capabilities of humanity and travel, whatever, right? So we eventually developed more complex and more complex models, but the thing is like, the models will never be the reality. Reality is still different. And back to quantum mechanics and that whole, the paradox that we are seeing there. And there are some really awesome experiments that have now been performed to kind of, again, to illustrate the paradox inherent to quantum mechanics. So if I go back to that, like, my personal best model of that is that, again, like if we're talking about quantum mechanics, one of their very surprising corollaries is that observer creates reality kind of thing. That's kind of one layman, grossly oversimplified explanation. So what's happening? The way I think about this is actually, so think about the universe as this quantum soup. It's quantum soup of constantly moving stuff. And there's some blobs of particles in this quantum soup. Within those blobs, there are the models of, I'm a human being, those models kind of get created. But the thing is like, as part of their physical, if you will, process underlying this universe, when there is the perception of the photon as going through specifically being perceived by the observer, they're all part of the same process. Right, so observer is just as much a part of this quantum soup as this particle, and observer is not some kind of independent conscious entity, but their act of observation created, not the act, but the physical process of observation creates what is being observed creates the observer at the same time, as an illusion within this blob of, quantum soup. And it's probably is not making much sense, but that's as much as I can.
No, actually it does, because there's a physics theory about that, for example, it's actually true about the frequency of the wave. For example, if you are in a street as an observer, if the ambulance is approaching you versus moving far away.
Yeah, talking about Doppler effect.
Exactly. So I think that would be also the same in terms of visual, I believe. But you're tapping into a really interesting topic, which was about observation, and also connected a little bit with the meditation. All these like meditation gurus, they believe that in order to maintain that state of mind, but obviously you had a different view about the state of mind. You need to be an observer, meaning that anything that happens around you, you need to have a neutral reaction, neutral belief, neutral mindset. Just
not all of the meditation gurus think that way, and actually, that's kind of, if you will, there are some people who kind of, that's the model of the world, and again, it's not the final model, because okay, but what is observing? So it's you can keep going deeper, right?
So why don't you elaborate more?
Yeah, so it's in many humans love models, and one of the common models that we use is a spiral, as kind of we look at things in this way and then realize, oh, they're more like this, and then like, oh, actually they're like this original thing but with a twist, and so on. We keep going in spirals, and that the process of meditation, one metaphor I can give for you is that, again, as a human being quite often initially identifies themselves with like, oh, my emotions and my thoughts and my perceptions, oh, this is me, you're deeply into your story, right? And then you meditate and do other things, so maybe you bump your head against like a ceiling or whatever happens, and then you have a different perception, different model, like, oh, okay, here's some kind of me observing this stuff, but I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my perceptions, and so on. And again, this is not the final stage in this spiral. And then you realize, oh, okay, so actually all of that stuff is me, and the process of observation is me, and everything is me. Kind of the boundaries of that model of self, eventually they dissolve. And when you in internal model kind of the boundaries of what you used to call self and what you used to call the external world, when they kind of collapse, and you see that all of that is kind of one unknowable thing, then it's, I guess, that's a pretty stable model.
It was really important it's really important to tap into this, because in order to become a business person, an entrepreneur, if you want to change the world somehow, you need to have an open mind, that everything is possible, perhaps. So I think this was fundamental to discuss that. And I believe you lead, you have few organizations, non-for-profit and even for-profit. If you can explain what those organizations are, and again, we come back to the topic of mindset and perhaps team culture, as it is also one of the keys.
Over my life, the majority of my life, I've been what people typically refer to as a tech entrepreneur. And I ended up being an entrepreneur pretty accidentally, because again, growing up in the Soviet Union, the concept of entrepreneurship didn't exist. I've been taught that there's a concept of profiteering, when people buy stuff and then they sell it at a higher price and they make some money on that, and that's so bad, because they basically steal the money from others. That's what they do, right? But then eventually Soviet Union fell apart, and I had a few little experiments in entrepreneurship in the university, and then eventually, after my first major job at a big company, I ended up leaving that company with a couple of friends. We started the first business, and I never looked back, right? And it's entrepreneurship is interesting because people get into this for all kinds of reasons. Again, like you take an individual, and maybe their reason was to make money because for their psychology that was exciting. Maybe it was a way to express their creative potential. Maybe it was the way for them to really show those people who didn't believe into them, who didn't love them. Maybe it's the way for them to get love. Maybe whatever. Who the heck knows? It's like there are so many ways we humans think about stuff. And again, then some businesses, they kind of develop to a degree, they become lifestyle businesses. In me personally, I have a lot of energy of curiosity. So for me, kind of learning and being curious about stuff and constantly learning has always been very important. And the business is always the business always reflects, or any kind of organization reflects, their core energy, if you will, of people involved in those businesses, right? And for me, the energy of being curious and changing and growing has always been important. So always was thinking a lot about how do we change the business, how can we improve and grow, and so on. Yeah, and now I'm involved in a few different things. Not in a major way. At this stage of my life, I'm doing more, if you will, thinking and reflection, and paying more attention to many other aspects of life. But I enjoy a lot supporting other people and sharing with them their things, the concept, the models that I have learned how to build a business. Because at the core of it, the business, for me, there are some very simple concepts you can build on, and again, can be applied to what we call a business, can be applied to any kind of other initiative, and so on.
Dmitry, when you build in a company, you build it for company to be sold in future, or you build in a company that you would like to work endlessly all your life? Because talking about like a blockchain, Ethereum, I guess
yes,
almost all people who decided to build blockchain, they build blockchain as a public good, not as a company which they eventually would like to exit. But when you build your projects, are you in advance thinking that you will exit, or you're building as a life venture?
Right. Yeah, and I would say that even in the blockchain space, there are plenty of people who really just want to build it and get lots of money, and then they think that they will be happy and whatnot, right? And my personal learning over the years is that if our thinking is about some point in the future when things will be so great, and we're trying to escape the current moment because it seems imperfect, then it's eventually that whole story will blow up in one way or another. So I believe that the better we can connect with the fact that what we have right now is what we have, and how can we enjoy that, the process of building this, the process of actually going forward with this, the more aligned we are with the flow of life, because it's unstoppable and unpredictable, and all of your goals of what might happen, they will likely will be totally they will be affected by so many things, right? So I would say, whether it's in life or whether it's in business, it's like, okay, let's bring it to the current moment. Okay, are we building this, and are we, as people working in the business, do we feel joy doing this, right? Like, or do we like trying to grind? Oh, we hate it, it's so painful, but like we have to do this because there will be some time in the future, there will be this kind of bright future. I think this is a dead end, because we eventually realize that this is like a way our mind is habituated, is like trying to resist what is happening right now and telling ourselves, oh, sometime in the future things will be different, right? And this is, I see, as the biggest trap, the very common trap of of the most basic trap of human consciousness.
So to open a successful company, first you should find peace in mind, right? And find happiness, right?
Because like the way you're phrasing it, it's like, it sounds like a recommendation. Like I can tell somebody, this is what you should do. And I don't believe in recommendations, right? Because somebody will create a company that looks extremely successful, and they will be building this company because they just want to make tons of money and maybe buy the biggest fucking yacht and, you know, then whatever is their dream, right? And they can be very, very successful, right? So advice, you know, is an impossible thing to do, but human beings learn constantly, right? And the best way for us to learn is, well, we learn the most from our own experiences, but we can also learn by looking at the experience of others, right? And we can share our experiences, and we should, the deeper we can share those experiences, not just kind of like in a prescriptive way, do this and then whatever, but kind of share on a more deeper emotional level, and people can connect with it and like, oh yeah, like when I listen to myself, it's really like I really trying to build this business because I deep down in myself, I think that when I'm this successful, then people will finally love me, right? But if you go deeper into this kind of thinking pattern, it really means that deep down in yourself, you believe that you're a piece of shit, and you're trying to hide it from the world, and you're really hoping, but if I do this, or maybe I will change the world for the better, I'll build a successful business, then nobody will notice how much a piece of shit I am, right? But that's a kind of, again, this is a very common way most people operate, and this is a dead end, right? Like, you know, and I would say that a more direct way is like, oh yeah, I'm a piece of shit, kind of recognizing all of those thoughts we have, all of the emotions we have, and going deeper into that. And the more we can open up to that, to those intrinsic things in ourselves, then there is more power in ourselves to do whatever we want to do, build this business, build any kind of initiatives, but without the fear. Because again, when our attempts are driven by this internal fear, desire, there's a lot of attachment to that. You know, there's attachment to this particular outcome. Then we also have lots of fear, like, oh, what if this doesn't happen? And whenever things go wrong, then it creates a lot of stress because that fear really comes up, like, oh no, we're not going to achieve this. Like, what do we do? And we become very reactive. We lose a lot of our power, right? So kind of that's what's very commonly unfolding.
At what age can an average Joe like me expect becoming so wise? You know,
Yeah,
like a business wise. Like
you're not an average Joe, right? Like, you know, so that's really whatever this story we can tell ourselves, right? And some people, they have certain perception of the world when they are 14. Some people, you know, die when they're 90, and their mind is still trying to tell them, you know what, you'll be happy when you get $1 billion and you will have a harem of wives or whatever the heck is your story, right? But again, the story is unique, right? And my point is that you can never emulate somebody, and like, because again, from the outside, oh wow, this guy looks cool and wise or whatever, right? But you don't know what's going on inside a particular human being, whether Richard Branson, Vitalik, Elon Musk, who the heck knows. They all have all kinds of, every human has infinite number of aspects to them, right? And you know, it's a lifelong process just to understand your own aspects. You know, all those different parts of yourselves and different patterns and things like that, right? So you can never kind of try to emulate somebody is a dead end, but the more you can learn and sense yourself and observe all of the things that happen in your human being without judgments, that's kind of, if you will, this is a faster path to kind of what a human being is seeking.
So you touch based on a really important aspect or concept, which is impact. It's about creating an impact. It's not about creating a profitable business, you know, that you will feel good about yourself, or I mean, financially, or even like, you know, serving your ego, right? It's about what kind of impact. But so in your point of view, what do you think that blockchain blockchain's role was in terms of creating such an impact. Did it change anything, and how did it change, and what do you think the future is going to be looking like? I mean, using blockchain in a kind of forefront.
I think blockchain technology is accelerating the movement of the world toward disintermediation, right? Like just like internet was one of the phases in that. It's like it used to be that here's you, an individual, a consumer, whatever, and there are so many layers between you and access to goods and information, whatnot. And with the advent of internet, now there are many fewer steps between that, but there is still that, right? And I think that blockchain is the next huge evolutionary step in that direction, when humans can be human being, I don't know, somebody in Pakistan can be involved right now in economic activity, in worldwide economic activity, and nobody can tell them to not do this, to not learn this, to stop them from, owning some actually cryptocurrency and stuff like that. So for me, it's really the movement towards every single individual having more empowerment, but as well as having more accountability, right? Because also many developed countries, you can see that they kind of become a nanny state, right? And we can see this in this COVID situation, right? And when we're scared, then we want to run to the big daddy, the government, like, oh, big daddy, protect us from this bad thing. And the big daddy steps in, but the way they step in, it's a very, can be very pig-headed, and the attempts to help, those scared people, they backfire and they create more violence and injustice and so many other things, right? So, and when with the blockchain, then we are more directly connected with our economic activity, the ownership, self-sovereignty, accountability. And that can be scary for people too, because when we mess up and we make, a mistake, or we lose our money to a scammer, we lose our password or stuff like that, and then nobody can help us, right? And it's very scary, because we used to oh, okay, can we call bank, police, whatever, and then they can help us. And blockchain kind of gives you that more freedom, and more internal responsibility, accountability, if you will. So that's a huge evolution of the human society.
And go ahead.
I can add just a couple of words. Just yesterday, I talked with one of my colleagues. She is living in Myanmar. We worked together since 2017, 2016. And now in Myanmar, some kind of revolution, the government, military government trying to take control, local dwellers say don't agree, they don't want to military regime back. They say average people saying it's enough, and they're trying to do some kind of guerrilla activities. And but Myanmar people, some of them could be quite good programmers, and I just yesterday realized that they know about Uniswap and about PancakeSwap, and they not even trade. They code the apps, and what is the beauty in blockchain, that anybody from Pakistan or from Myanmar, Myanmar obviously under sanctions, or maybe Iran also under sanction, any coder can deploy permissionless dApp on blockchain, and in case the permissionless dApp could really contribute to society, doing something maybe small but quite significant, it should be appreciated, and anybody can, even if you're 14 years old, you can make money and do something good. And
absolutely right. And it's no longer limited to coders, right? Because coding is a pretty specific, it's a very specific skill, and you have to have certain capabilities, and the knowledge can be acquired, but whatever. Not everybody can be coder because their mind doesn't think this way. But actually, people now can get involved in so many other ways, right? Because, as you know, many crypto projects are now being run by DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and there are people in those organizations who don't code, but they can do some creative design, they can do some writing, they can do some other activities, right? So it's basically a way for anybody to somehow get involved and do some work, and like even maybe they play this game, right? Like the recently popular game is Axie Infinity, and Axis Infinity, and I recently read an article somewhere about that people who can play this game full time, they can actually make a US level living wage just from playing that game, blockchain game, right? So that's really fascinating, right? And that's for me just one little indicator of where things are going.
Yeah, so my question would be, what do you think of the gamification aspect of blockchain, and specifically these days NFTs, non-fungible tokens?
I mean, NFTs are amazing, right? And there are so many things we have just touched on with NFTs, right? Because right now most NFT stuff is really about art and stuff like that. But NFTs, the concept of non-fungible tokens, is applicable to many more areas of human life beyond that. And
I mean, healthcare,
so I think
for
that's
example. Yeah, health
yeah.
data.
Anyway, like any kind of yeah, and gamification in general, I think it's amazing because humans love to have fun, right? And we learn a lot from that. And this is the way we learn the best, right? Because if you can learn a fun game and then get some prizes and whatnot, and in the meantime you can learn a lot, then this is a really awesome way to do it, because regular schools are quite often very boring. It's like there's still a lot of learning that's supposed to happen in a very boring way when people have to remember lots of stuff, and it really doesn't work, right? There's this one of my little hobbies is languages, and there's this app called Duolingo, and it's a company that's been around for like a decade, I think, and they recently went public, and they've been teaching millions of people languages in a really fun, gamified kind of way. Oh, here's a game, and you do this, you get those prizes and whatnot. And it's far from perfect, but there's already so much cool stuff happening there that's why millions of people enjoy that. So I think that making things fun for people to interact with them, that's really important aspect of gaming adoption.
Learning. You're also mentoring people, or do you have an organization in terms of helping with the learning?
I'm involved in this company called BlockGeeks, whose mission is to help onboard the next billion of people into the blockchain space. And yeah, personally, I mentor and coach people. People reach out to me with a number of different kind of things. For some people I mentor, coach about building a business. For some people, it's psychological healing. And for some people, we talk about really the most important things like love and God and consciousness and whatnot.
I have a question about NFT. Recently, I'm following quite a few guys from South Africa who has a development company, and just recently I realized they launched their product, and they made some kind of so the company called Molecular, mm-hmm. And this company are partnered with VitaDAO. Mm-hmm. And I was very surprised. Vitalik spoke with VitaDAO founder. You can find it in YouTube. And what we realized, VitaDAO working on longevity, mm-hmm. And they're allowing scientists who did not get enough funds to make patent or to do some tests. So scientists can apply for funding, and contributors will get a portion of the future patent of scientists who are working on longevity problem.
Yes.
And what guys are saying, they're saying in 20, 30 years, it will be achievable endless life.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely achievable. And actually, Azam, so she also has a couple of friends working in longevity, and they actually confirming this. So NFT could be really very have very good impact for our society, like making enable for not for startuppers and sometimes scammers, but for scientists, for regular scientists who lack of funding to get 50 grand to continue researches, and of course 90% of them will fail, but 10% could change all the whole world, right?
Mhm.
So what do you think? What's your
Yeah.
opinion about longevity and
Longevity.
all this stuff?
Yeah, it's an exciting area of life, if you will, and I've had long held interest in that, and kind of I got Vitalik interested in that many years ago, and Vitalik has made some major donations into a number of longevity related organizations, starting with Aubrey de Grey's Sense and many others. And I think that it's really, again, talking about impact of the blockchain. Blockchain is a better way for people to get organized around some common goals, and there existing mechanisms there. They have lots of limitations, right? And that's why a lot of scientific research ends up being either financed by governments or by the military, as one branch of the government or whatever it is, right? So I'm really excited that blockchain with its various aspects, from just the cryptocurrency to NFTs aspects and whatnot, is an exciting way for people to get organized about their common goals, and also get organized without any really across geographical boundaries. But anybody in the world who is interested in this stuff, again, can get involved, and they can participate, and they can contribute money, they can contribute doing some tasks, and helping that organization to achieve their goals. So yeah, that's quite exciting stuff.
That's the borderless, I would say, capability, which is very similar to space industry. And if you look at the Earth from space, obviously there's no border. And I think we quite forget that we're all one, obviously. But it's quite interesting. Also, what do you think of I mean, you mentioned DAO. But what are going to be the next tech trends that are going to be obviously revolutionizing human life on Earth, planet Earth? Obviously, we're going to be extraterrestrial kind of like creature, hopefully, in the next 10 years. But what would be the next kind of like big trends in technology in your point of view?
I mean, blockchain is still in the very early stages of where it is, right? So it will take decades to fully play out and figure out how that technology will change human society. And it's truly fascinating, because things on the blockchain, they can be easily copied and then recombined with different aspects of that. And that's what we've seen in the blockchain space, is like people come up with this, somebody comes up with something else, and then some people say, oh, let me take a piece of this and this and combine this. So there's so much creativity that has been unleashed, and we're still in very early stages of what it can be, right? So that space. And then obviously artificial intelligence, right? All of the developments and their processing capabilities and the way we have been modeling human consciousness. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening there. And one of the people who used to write a lot of stuff on this and made a big impact on me and Vitalik is Ray Kurzweil, and he's got a bunch of books. And his most recent book is called "How to Create a Mind." That's kind of one of the very interesting again books in this whole space of artificial intelligence.
What do you think of longevity and the next big trends, perhaps as we're kind of like approaching this kind of like great technologies?
Well, it's exciting. I really hope that I wish those projects succeed as much and as fast as possible. And for my own sake, I'm turning 50 next year, and we'll see how long, it's destined for me to be around. And for longevity, one thing that I really I'm excited about is this. At least it's now being discussed as something really important, right? Because people used to just escape this as, well, you know what, aging is part of quote unquote normal life and blah blah blah. Well, it's until recently we couldn't do anything about this. So I guess that kind of attitude was the best way for us to cope with our fear of getting sick and dying, as most as humans do, right? But now their tone of the conversation is changing, right? And longevity, it's not like there is a magical switch within the human being, like, okay, we flip the switch and you will live longer. It just, there are many different afflictions, that affect the human being, from like all kinds of mind-related diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia, to things like cancer and many other things, right? So longevity is just an umbrella name for many projects and things, right? And those projects will develop with their uneven speed, and some will achieve some progress. So I'm kind of looking forward to many of them, making those pieces of progress, and then hopefully we can take advantage of this and that. And yeah, it's horrible how much human pain and suffering exists because of so many diseases out there, right? So longevity field is really the field of creating more or maintaining more human happiness and joy for a long time. So I'm really excited this field is kind of getting more attention, more financing, more. It sounds like there is a bit more success with some of the initiatives happening there. So it's very exciting, awesome field.
That's great.
Any questions? Let's wrap with this good idea that we need just to keep our body 20, 30 years more in a good shape. In 20, 30 years, we can extend our life to maybe probably 120 years. Then, who knows?
Yes, it's a good point. And very important point related to this is also human mind always tries to escape into the future, right? Because all of this stuff is awesome. And you don't know, like you, me, tomorrow we might have a stroke and fall dead, right? So all our thinking about what's going to happen with blockchain and longevity is not going to affect that. That might still happen, who knows? So let's also, as we dream and we move forward with all of this exciting stuff, blockchain, longevity, AI, whatnot, let's also make sure that we constantly stay in the present moment, right? Okay, how the present moment is already here, and how can we be as deeply immersed, responsive to what currently is, instead of like escaping the present moment into thinking of how good or how bad things are going to be.